Today, Scarlett Cochran is an accomplished attorney and financial expert. But rewind to her early 20s, and she was a struggling single mom who had just left the military.
Back then, I was making about $25,000 a year. And it's not nothing, but it certainly was challenging with a baby, paying daycare, working full time, and also not having a social safety net around me. So I was a Marine and was stationed far away from my family. So I didn't even have family that I could rely on to help do things like provide childcare or even save me from having to spend on dinner a couple of nights a week.
Throughout her childhood, Cochran remembers her parents didn't really talk about the importance of developing good financial habits. Instead, she remembers money often being a sticking point for her mom and dad.
I remember my mom writing down their budget every month, and she had a whole bunch of Steno notebooks, those flip-up notebooks, and that's where she would manage the family budget. I also knew that there was a discrepancy between how my parents contributed to the household financially. So my mom would put all of her money into the household, and my dad would only give my mom some of his money, but he would keep some of it to himself. And I know that that was always a point of disagreement between my parents about how much my father was actually giving my mother. And so any conversations around money were often very negative, filled with a lot of negative emotion.
This feeling led to a lack of understanding about topics like budgeting, saving, or investing. It wasn't until Cochran graduated from high school and enlisted in the Marine Corps that she had a solid stream of income flowing in. Even though she wasn't making much, she still had a good portion of disposable income left over.
I think I was making around $12,000 or $13,000 a year because the military provided my housing and my food. But the wonderful thing about that was that I had $13,000, well, some after taxes, about half, to spend on whatever I wanted to. So I didn't have much of a budget. It was either I had money and I could do things and buy things, or I didn't have money. But of course, that changed the minute I became pregnant with my daughter, Alexis. And suddenly my money needed to do other things than just buy McDonald's and new jeans. It needed to buy child safety seats and plates and forks and groceries. So I really had to learn how to manage my money really down to the penny back then, because I wasn't making that much money and I had to create and support an entire household and another little person all by myself.
Without a college degree, Cochran was working an entry-level job that led nowhere. She found herself living below the poverty line and often struggled to put together enough cash for groceries, gas, and other essentials.
Back then, checks were a thing. And I would sometimes do something which I would never recommend anyone do, which is also a lot harder now, which is floating checks. So I would write checks a couple of days before I was going to get paid, knowing that it would take a while for the check to actually clear. And by the time it did, I would have money in my bank account. But that wasn't always the case. Sometimes the check would clear faster, and then I'd have to pay a $50 overdraft fee on the check. But those were the things that I had to do in those days because of how much money I made, and also just because my financial skills, my money management skills, were not as good as they are now.
Part of where she is now is thanks to her past self. Cochran knew she had to go back to school in order to earn more, so she enrolled in college and did online classes at night while juggling a day job.
Back then, there were many days where I felt overwhelmed. I remember I would cry about how hard life felt back then. And it's not to say that every single day felt hard, because I would also look for the joy in my daily life. And when I look back on those times, there were so many beautiful memories that I made with my daughter, even back then. So back then I would go to the library a lot. I loved books. We would look for free activities that we could do. We weren't necessarily always going out to the movies or going out to the mall shopping, because those weren't in the budget, but there was still so much available to us even back then.
Cochran eventually graduated college and went on to attend Yale Law School, where she earned her law degree. Now she's an attorney, but also spends her days sharing what she's learned in order to help others get on a better financial path. She says the best thing you can do is look at where your money is going head on. To start, create a detailed spending plan that looks 12 months out.
The 1 year spending plan is a bird's eye view of what your budget and your life will look like for the course of 12 months. And the reason why I advocate using the 1 year spending plan is because, number one, so many of our expenses are repetitive. So why are we budgeting from scratch every month? But also, number two, there are also portions of our budgets that actually take multiple months to achieve, things that we want to spend money on in any given year that it might take us a whole year to build up a sinking fund for example, like the holidays or vacations or big house projects that we know are coming up.
This spreadsheet should include all basic living expenses listed out month by month, along with where extra disposable income is going. How much is funneling into retirement or dropping into an emergency fund? Is there enough left over to go to Mexico at the end of the year? Cochran says that this process offers organization and transparency. Setting a monthly budget for eating out or weekend spending might be hard the first month or two, but it does get easier. And while some view saving as restrictive, it doesn't have to be. You can still be on a budget and spend cognizantly on the select items or services that make you happy.
When you prioritize spending for joy, then when you spend, you actually get the experience of enjoying the spending. Whereas so many of us, when we spend money, we do it either habitually, so we're not thinking about it. So we're missing an opportunity to really savor the fact that, hey, I just got to buy this thing for myself. I'm happy. This is what I wanted to be able to do. So we miss out on that experience. And often, sometimes we even guilt trip ourselves. We have quote unquote guilty pleasures, which I think we should just get rid of that entirely, because your pleasure shouldn't be guilty. You should just be enjoying it because you deserve to spend your money on the things that you enjoy.
To find out more about all things personal finance and our guest, Scarlett Cochran, head to viewpointsradio.org. Also, check out her book, It's Not About the Money, A Proven Path to Building Wealth and Living the Rich Life You Deserve, now available online and in select bookstores. For more behind the scenes, search Viewpoints Radio on Twitter and Facebook. This story was written and produced by Amira Zaveri. I'm Gary Price. This segment is brought to you by Capital One. With one of the best savings rates in America, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One N.A., member FDIC. Coming up on Viewpoints.
I was very, very fortunate to work with some of the top chefs and pastry chefs in Boston and in New York, and that really helped me build a very strong foundation.
It's never too late to follow your passion. Then,
in the last 4 years, we've seen an unprecedented rise in sports betting. Nearly more than 30 states have now legalized some form of sports betting, either in person or through mobile sports betting application.
The all-too-accessible world of online sports betting. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.